Hello, people. I'm Clarissa. The story I'm going to tell you happened a year ago, and it'll be about how my mom and I were not talking to each other for a couple of weeks because of one guy. Everything happened when I was 16. I lived with my granny back then, 'cause my mom worked in another city on a rotational basis. My grandma has worked as a language teacher for her whole life, and when she retired, she began tutoring French and Italian at home. One day, as usual, I came home after school and found Granny and her new student studying in the living room. I was totally astonished by him. A tall and really handsome guy. Oh my God, he was perfect. For me, it was the very first time I felt an attraction toward somebody, be it the first love or whatever you call it, but I knew I wouldn't be able to stop thinking about him. Granny kindly asked me to go upstairs, but I definitely caught a vivid interest in his eyes before I left the room. Later on, I figured out that his name was Alex, and he was dying to learn French. Ooh la la! And since he had just started, I figured out that he was going to visit our house pretty often and for kind of a long time. There were no doors between the living room and the kitchen, and any time he'd come to study, I immediately felt that I really needed to have some tea or read something right there to be able to get a better look at that cutie. Of course, I was too shy to go over and talk to him or show my feelings or anything else. Besides, he was older than me. Later, my granny told me that he was 24. But, that was not that big of an age difference between us, and I kept fantasizing about the two of us falling in love with each other, walking in the park, holding hands, and stuff like that. I'm sure that all of my feelings were pretty noticeable, 'cause really soon my granny figured everything out. Like how I felt about Alex, and she was winking at me and smiling and stuff. And once, I made a complete ass of myself. Oh, it's still so embarrassing to even remember it. Once Granny asked me to add some fertilizer to our flower bed, and while I was doing it, I'd really gotten myself dirty with all that, manure. And when I was done, I went to the house, sweating through my clothes, and I saw Alex. Apparently, he'd come in, and I didn't notice him. And he saw me dirty and smelling really bad. He covered his mouth and nose because of me, and then quickly got back to his studies. I rushed upstairs and tried to avoid even being in the same room with him for the next couple of days. I was totally embarrassed. Then my mom came back home from another shift at work, and I was dying to tell her everything about this guy. We've always been really close. I could even say that we were more like friends than we were like mother and daughter. Anyway, we had plans to go have lunch at a cafe, go shopping, and then to the beauty salon, primp a bit. And when we returned back home, Alex was just about to leave. His regular study session with Granny had just ended. For me, it was the first time we had faced each other after the whole manure incident, and my face immediately turned red. He, on the other hand, seemed to be in a playful mood. He made a joke about me looking great. Remember, I had just left the beauty salon, though the salon look was probably not as memorable as when he'd seen me for the last time, after my gardening expedition. But when he saw me turn red from head to toe, he immediately mentioned that last time, even the dirt on my clothes and unpleasant odor could not have spoiled such a beauty. And that made me blush even more. Then he gave a compliment to my mom and just walked away, and I thought, wow, what a gentleman he turned out to be. Later that day, we were chit-chatting about Alex, and my mom agreed that he was really stunning. And Granny said that he was really smart, and I don't know why, but this made me proud of him, like he was already my boyfriend, So we came to the conclusion that I should probably talk to him, and Granny promised that the next day they had a session, she'd give me a chance. I was really excited that day. I racked my brain trying to come up with an idea of what I was going to tell him and how I should behave. I mean, whether I should stand to the side or get up closer to him or sit on the couch next to him. Then, when he came, Granny said she needed him to wait for her for 5 minutes and that I'd entertain him while she finished what she was doing. So there we were. And I felt really awkward because I'd forgotten everything I wanted to tell him. But fortunately, he was not shy at all and began the conversation. Obviously, after that day, it became easier for me to socialize with him. And very soon, we became friends on Facebook. Alex was giving me lots of advice on movies to watch or books to read. Yep. He really turned out to be that special type of guy who not only looks like a god, but is also pretty intelligent. Of course, there was nothing truly romantic about our small talks. He asked me about my mom, my school, and my friends, and even whether I had a boyfriend. You know what I mean? And for me, this question was sort of a sign that he might have liked me back. But then something went wrong, completely wrong. My mom returned home once again, but this time she looked inspired, so to speak. Everything was going as it normally would, except that she was constantly receiving texts on her cell and smiling at them. And when I asked who she was texting with, she said nobody and changed the subject. Alex continued to talk to me a little bit whenever he'd come to one of his sessions with Granny, but this time he was really interested in my mom. I mean, he kept asking how she was, whether she was happy, and at some point I began suspecting that he actually liked her and not me. I mean, my mom is young. She had me when she was only 17. She's also very pretty, and Alex and I were definitely not in a relationship, but it did hurt me. So then I decided to ask my mom directly whether it was Alex who was texting her, and this time she had no chance to avoid answering me. I was like, what? I just couldn't believe that the guy who I fell in love with actually preferred my mom over me, and to boot, it seemed like she didn't even mind. But wait until I tell you that they actually went out on a date. I was not supposed to know about it. Of course I raised hell. But you know what was even more offending than all of this? My mom didn't think that she was wrong in this situation. She said that it was her life and her choice to go on a date with a nice guy because she was already a grown-up woman while I was not. And that for me, he was way too old to have any romantic interest in me. I wondered aloud why she didn't think that she was too old for him. And then there were many other offending words exchanged. A lot of tears. Mine, of course. And we ended this argument by just not talking to each other. There are no words to describe how offended and devastated I was that all this was happening. Not only did my first love, so to speak, happen to not feel what I thought he felt, but also the closest and dearest person to me, my own mother, suddenly turned out to be my rival for the same guy. Honestly, I used to think that any normal parent would prefer their child to anything else, but this time it all looked like my mom was choosing a guy over me. When my mom left for work the next day, we were still not talking to each other. And when my granny found out everything, she took my mom's side at first. And this just pissed me off all over again. I tried to explain my feelings to Granny, like as a grown-up person, but for some reason all I could say was that everything was just so unfair. And then I cried like a baby. But then she told me that when my mom went on a date with Alex, he pretended as if he'd forgotten his wallet and stuff, so that my mom had to pay for everything, you know? This probably meant that they wouldn't be together anyway, and that he was not as charming as I once thought he was. What could I say? I feel bad that my mom had had such a bad date, but I have to admit that I was really happy that my mom and Alex didn't hit it off. It seemed like justice had been served. I mean, she shouldn't have stolen the guy I liked. You're probably wondering whether I've made up with my mom. Of course, we definitely made up, and that's one more story that's worth telling here. So one day, when Alex had come over for another study session, I was in the kitchen, but this time it was not on purpose. I did not want to see him. I just hadn't finished cooking yet. So Granny started asking him some study questions, like mock conversations and situations speaking French. I was barely listening to them at first, but at some point I realized that this session would probably be their last one. I couldn't believe my ears. Well, I was not as good at French as my Granny would have liked me to be, but I could clearly distinguish a few words. It seemed like Granny was trying to sort of reenact a situation in a restaurant where a guy forgets his wallet and now needs to ask his date to pay for everything. I couldn't help but glance over at them. Granny looked really cunning, though she tried to behave as if she knew nothing about his and my mom's unpleasant meeting. But Alex's reaction was just something you should have been there to see. I totally knew that this time he was embarrassed, and I bet to an even bigger extent than I was being covered with that manure in his imagination. I rushed to call my mom and tell her what had just happened, having completely forgotten that we were still kind of in a fight. So yes, in a way, one and the same guy managed to make the two of us stop talking to each other at first, and then become the first thing that we started to talk about again.
Hello, my name is Adrian, and I had a hobby that made everyone think that I wasn't manly enough. Sounds weird, right? So, my hobby was playing with dolls and collecting them. Since I was a little kid, I always preferred dolls to traditional toys intended for boys. It was so much more interesting to me to choose dresses for dolls, and I was fascinated by decorating dollhouses and stuff like that. It wasn't a big deal when I was a kid, and my parents and older sister weren't against it. When I started high school, I didn't exactly play with them, but I kept collecting them. You know, some people collect coins or action figures, and I collected dolls. This also affected my sense of style. I preferred more flamboyant choice of clothing and hairstyles. But for the most of my life, I was hiding my passions from everyone except my closest friends. When I started high school, my secret got out in the most awkward way possible. My sister's friends were coming over to her and accidentally caught a glimpse of my room full of dolls. One of them made a photo and later was showing it to people. Stuff like this travels fast, and soon enough, guys from my class found out about it. They started making fun of me because of it. Some were just making relatively innocent jokes, but a certain group of 4 guys started to mock me every day about it. They were saying that I'm girly and joking that I probably wear dresses while nobody is looking. It was bearable at first, but every day it was getting worse because they were actively telling it to everyone. Soon, the entire school knew about my secret hobby. My nickname became Adriana, and they were trying to offend me every time they got a chance. Almost every time I tried to say something, they were parodying me in a girly voice. This continued for a couple of months, and I didn't want to go to school because of it. My sister was very sorry, and she stopped being friends with the girl who made a photo. Moreover, she was defending me against anyone who dared to say a bad thing about me. Later, I found photoshopped images of me with a lipstick and other girly stuff. I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't want everyone to think that I was too girly. So I tried desperately to appear more manly than I was. I started wearing darker clothing, reading about cars and stuff that I thought most of the boys liked. I even tried to talk with a lowered voice and be more aggressive, like mocking other guys too and making nasty jokes. But nobody would believe it if I still had my dolls. So I did something that I regret to this day. I threw all of my dolls away in a fit of rage. At least I could have given them to some kid or donate them somewhere. But instead, I just threw them out and made photos to prove it. I collected them my whole life, and then, all of them, gone in one day. Guys continued to mock me, but less and less every day. Soon, everything was kind of alright. Nobody bothered me, and I thought I would feel better that way. But honestly, I hated being like that every day. But I desperately wanted to be as manly as the other guys. Then, one day, something happened. In a hallway, a bunch of younger boys, like a year younger, were harassing a girl from their class. She was a shy girl with a speech defect. She was asking them to go away, but they would just repeat what she said, parodying her speech. My classmates were standing not too far away, laughing and filming it on their phones. I joined them, but I didn't find it funny at all. I don't like conflicts, and even a thought of trying to stop it was terrifying for me. But if I wouldn't do it, then who would? So I started walking towards them. Guys from my class didn't understand what was happening at first. I stood between the girl and younger boys and said, "Stop bothering her." They started mocking me. Oh, look, Adriana came to help. I came real close to one of them, like eye to eye, and said quietly, "Go away." He continued to mock me, but I just stood real close to him, not budging for an inch. Soon, they both got afraid and went away. My classmates continued to laugh and film it. I didn't care. I took the girl to the teacher and described the situation, and the teacher said that she was proud that we had such responsible young men in our school. For the next few days, I was thinking a lot about this situation. Guys who were so proud of their manliness didn't do anything. They were just standing and watching. And this is who I looked up to? This is who I wanted to be? So I said to myself, enough is enough. Soon, I bought myself new clothes, the type I always liked, flamboyant and colorful, and changed my hairstyle. When my classmates saw that, they started mocking me again. But I didn't care, because I knew that the only thing they could do is talk. But I still didn't have my dolls, and it was still bothering me. I didn't want to start collecting again, so I found another solution. I started sewing. I mean, if I like dressing my dolls and choosing clothing for them, why don't I do it for real people? I hope that by next year, I will be able to make a beautiful dress for my sister, because even if it was partly her fault for revealing my secret, she was supportive of me my whole life and stopped being friends with a girl who started it. Being manly or girly is not about how you dress or what you like, but about what kind of person you are. My sister is braver than any of my classmates, and that says a lot, mates.